Good morning, everybody. No mā haere mai kia operations and monitoring ngui. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I just want to warn you, advise you that we are live streaming, and like me, I always remember to put my mic on, so could you please follow my lead? We have one apology from Councillor Bentley. Are there any other apologies? Yes, Potoa. Mr. Wadu? Yep. Mr. Kima? No? Okay. Would someone like to move that the apologies from Councillor Bentley and Mr. Wadu are accepted? Moved Mr. Martin, seconded Councillor Gould. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. As usual, are there any declarations of interest where you may have a conflicting interest? As per the standing orders, are there any to be declared? There aren't any, thank you. Any urgent items not on the agenda that need urgent attention? Councillor Kawate.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you back in the chair. It's not an urgent business, but I just don't know at some stage if we could get appraised of the sculpture out at Hemel Gorge. I've been asked a few questions and I'm really not up to speed with it, and I just wondered if at some stage that could come our way.
I'd encourage you, Councillor Kawate, to ask those questions during the operations when Stavros is in the chair, and he...
Thank you.
We've got a very, very lengthy meeting today, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a number of presentations, so bear with us and your patience would be appreciated. So are there any other items of urgent business? Move on. Okay, we'll turn to page 7 and we'll ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting held on the 7th of September be confirmed as a true and correct record. Mr. Martin, Mr. Potoa Bosani Tuli is seconded. Are there any matters arising? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Done. Right, recommendation 1, the non-financial performance review for the financial year ended the 30th of June. If you turn to page 13, and Thomas and the team. James Thomas. The first report is detailing KPIs, and I know there's a number of questions coming forward, which is good. So to get matters right, would someone like to move that the report, non-financial performance for the financial year ended the 30th of June 2017 audited report be received? Councillor Kent, seconded Councillor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors and board members. I'll just summarise. I'll take the report as read because obviously it is a lengthy report. Look, it's a similar performance on the previous year, but there has been a very small decline. That reduction is mainly tied down to, I guess, buildings closing and the learner pool being shut. So the closure of the museum has obviously impacted their ability to achieve the number of visitors. The library move has also affected their ability with the change in the buildings and so forth around the level of service that they were providing. And the relining of the learner pool obviously meant that during that, I think, 4 to 6 week period, the number of visitors at the aquatic centre reduced as well. There will probably be some questions about the NRB survey, because as you know, the NRB survey is created to measure some of these performance measures. And I think if I was to summarise the survey, which is now online for anyone who's interested in getting a copy of that, there were 4 areas of improvement for council. Those were in recycling, a good improvement with regards to the levels of satisfaction on recycling. Noise control, and that's probably a reflection of last year. We were dealing with the lumber cube noise issues, whereas this is not. An improvement in satisfaction in council decision making and the way that the public felt we were spending our rates. So there were some good improvements in those areas as well. However, there were 3 declines in satisfaction, and probably no surprise that the biggest one was the museum with regards to its closure. Roads, which seems to be tied to obviously the issues out East Side and Tenai. and the quality of public toilets, which we're currently obviously addressing with a program of renewing those to an acceptable standard. So into that, over any questions?
Any questions around the table? Your worship.
The decline that you mentioned in satisfaction with roading, is that at all linked with the whole environment that started to happen about Tina Road and the build-up of pressure about the case for four-laning? Or can you break it down further to say where were the hot spots? Is it western side of the district as well as eastern? Because there's no doubt about it, the last 6 months, the focus has been on we've got to get that investment in four-laning of Tenai. And so that may have whipped up the community response, but at the same time you're seeing Western Road pressures emerge. Or can you not break it down? Does it just say satisfaction in roading?
Stavros, if you could come to the mic and give a response to that, I think that's a more specialised area.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. To the best of our knowledge, the dissatisfaction arises with state highways and mainly around the eastern corridor, and also the perennial question around the Nongotaha roundabout, which has always been on the agenda. And I'll talk later about some works NCTA is doing that in these areas. But none of our Rotorua Lakes roading network actually indicates any change to a current condition, capacity, efficiency, or safety issues. So most of the satisfaction comes from state highways.
Stavros, I just have one small question before I ask Mr. Bassini Tule to speak. I sent you an email regarding Old Taupo Road from Devon Street through to Malfoy Road, which I understand is a state highway. Has there been any action in terms of your inquiries with that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, those segments of the state highway are targeted for repairs and resurfacing, and during the summer period by NZTA. That's the advice I have.
Thank you. Mr. Bassini Tule?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. Kia ora, Mr. Collette. Just referring to page 13 with the title, Non-Financial Performance for the Financial Year ended 30 June 2017 Audited Report. Is that audited by Audit New Zealand, or is that an internal audit? And our second question is, will these results be included in the annual report?
Yes, so just to confirm that, the reason it says it's audited is because they are audited by Audit New Zealand, so they have completed the audit of that, of this part of what will go into the annual report, yes.
Mr. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's more of a comment, please, than not the questions of staff. Mr. Chairman, it concerns me that our KPIs haven't been completed to 100%, and I know perhaps 100% is a big wish list. But it does concern me the fact that we are slipping. And I ask the question of ourselves that's sitting around this table, are we setting the performance standards too high for the achievement of a higher percentage? If we are, I believe that we've got to possibly review it and have a look at ourselves. We might be out and beyond the real ability to do things within our district. I know we've had some very difficult situations as far as the climate and earthquakes and things like that as well, but when you set your KPIs, you're also basically setting your rates for what you're going to spend on KPIs. And if we're setting our KPIs too high, we need to acknowledge it ourselves and work through the process. So, Mr. Chairman, there's no criticism of anything, but for 2 years now we're actually moving backwards and not moving forwards. So let's have a look at ourselves if it's...
I think you have asked a question there, Councillor, Mr. Martin. I think you've raised a very important question. I'll just ask Mr. Williams, as CEO, to make a comment on that, because I think we've got that in hand.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So firstly, the couple of observations, I think, is that KPIs you set in an environment where you can predict what the future is going to bring. And of course the issue that this organisation has had now for some years is that we've had a lot of unpredictable events occur, such as weather events, such as the museum closure, and those could not realistically be predicted at the outset, but have certainly impacted on our KPI results. Secondly, we've had in the district significant levels of growth, more people moving into the area, but also increases in the likes of tourism and so on. And so those increases we're starting to see some implications of. I think the earlier comment about the dissatisfaction with roading isn't so much a factor of the roads, it's a factor of the issue that you're seeing much more traffic than what we have for an awful long time. The traffic volumes have significantly changed. So again, you're seeing a dissatisfaction being reflected in our KPI results. The other issue, of course, that's happened is that there's been a lot of legislative change over the period. So we've seen the introduction of a new Food Act, a new Pool Fencing Act and so on, and all of those changes again drive in implications for this organisation and how we respond. So again, another factor that you're seeing reflected in our KPI results. What the owners team is doing at the moment is looking at the long-term plan and looking at what we need to do in the long-term plan to set some realistic and appropriate KPIs for the organisation, and that will certainly be a topic that will be discussed in the preparation workshops that have been held coming up. Will be something certainly that you'll be wanting, no doubt, to raise, and there will be an opportunity in there to really question whether or not our KPIs are realistic and reflecting the performance expectations for the organisation.
Thank you for that, Mr. CEO. There's just one area that I want to accentuate the positive on page 25, because I know certain writers of letters to the editor have bashed this council around the head in terms of consenting, and I just want to read the total number of subdivision consents issued, 107 for the past financial year, was 87% higher compared to the 2015-16 year. 56 consents were issued in that period. So you can see what demands have gone on staff with the resources that have had to be put into that area. And whilst I hear what Councillor Mr. Martin is saying, maybe during the LTP process we can address some of these issues, that if we have got it wrong, I agree with you that we should be flexible. Are there any other questions? Councillor Gould.
Page 26. Percentage of residents feel that they can participate in decision making. 2016-17 shows 38%, which this council has gone out numerous times to the public requesting their information on different programs, like the 2030 vision, the spatial plan. We've actually gone out more than previous years, and yet we've been clobbered. Is people reading the readings wrong, or is the information being obtained asking the wrong question, or is the service of this council not good enough?
Do you want to, what you're saying is, have we got our communications plan? Are we not communicating correctly? That's the point you're raising. What do you think, Una? Okay.
So through the chair, look, I think all of what you've said is true to some degree. What I, as you probably know, I'm currently chair of Solgum on the democracy side, and one of the themes that's coming through there nationally but also internationally is an expectation from people that they should participate in decision making, and that's being heightened, and there's a lot of evidence to show particularly younger people have an expectation that they want to have a say. So what you've got is, in my view, a growth in expectation that people want to not only be informed, but they want to participate actively in decision making. And that's something that we do need to respond to. I don't think you can say that the organisation is failing. I think that there is a mismatch between what people would like to participate in and the level that they are at the moment. That's what that indicator is saying. It's really, at the end of the day, a statement to us to say that the sort of work that we've got ongoing at the moment with regards to involvement, the spatial plan will be going out for discussion, and it'll be out there over the next few weeks. And a reminder to us that we really have to make sure that people do have that awareness that they can participate, and secondly, they've got different mechanisms to be involved in that, in decisions on the spatial plan, as an example.
Mr. Mayor?
Want to comment that that the KPIs have always driven me crazy, actually, as has the NRB survey. They're only good at a moment in time. And I know we measure these, but I think the most important thing that we're facing today is setting the KPI for the long-term plan. And when you've got so many, you're just measuring stuff. And you're not really asking ourselves as a group of elected members, are we making a difference? And that's the chance that we've got to put into later in the day. This measuring stuff makes you feel good, but actually there's an answer for every one of those KPI, and so many councils focus on too much stuff that's a scattergun rather than the big projects, the key moves and the level of service, and are we satisfied? And I think that's our chance later today. We can all nitpick over little tiny things here, but we can find a reason why for every one of them, and I'd rather spend my energy on focusing on how we want to be seen by our community, by what we achieve in the long-term plan. So that's just a comment, because I could pick up each one of them and ask about how are we going on enhancing the aesthetic look. How wonderful that we've got 96%. Is that enough? You know, it's not a measure on its own that makes any difference to how we feel about where we're going as a council. And I think that's what we as councillors should be asking. The NRB survey the same. Are we satisfied? Why are we doing the NRB survey? Have we asked ourselves that question? And I think that's where we need to look to when we get to the next section on the LTP.
The Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to sort of counter the suggestion that's being made around the table that KPIs and performance things are something that we should change because we haven't managed to achieve 100%. That is ludicrous. The whole purpose in setting performance indicators is to measure how well we are doing. And if we do not achieve, we then set about determining what we are going to do about it to fix the problem, if it is a problem. That is the whole performance and performance indicators. Not so that we can skite to the population we've done a fantastic job. So please, let's put this in proper perspective. Now, there are two issues that are of major concern to me here when I see through these figures. The first one is the continued decline in the pedestrian foot counts in the CBD. This is about a fourth or fifth report I've received in a row, all showing declines in the CBD pedestrian counts. Whilst the retail spend may be up, that is only a reflection of increasing prices. The fact that the pedestrian count continues to decline says this council has not got its policy on renovating the CBD in the right place. We are not doing what we should be doing to regenerate the CBD. And I think it's about time we actually faced the fact and did something about it. And when you look at the Manawa project at the moment, and I read in the press, or a press release recently, that this is now likely to stretch into November, and I'm starting to ask myself, and I would like to have some assurance from the Chief Executive that this is not going to be allowed to stretch into the Christmas trading period. So perhaps we could have that answered first.
Through the chair, so there's a number of issues in there, and look, Councillor Kent, I have to completely agree with your first comment. The point of having KPIs is to set expectations of where we'd like to be, and then to understand whether we're making moves against that. And you're quite right. What I'm pleased with is that if you look at our recycling targets at the moment, we're certainly not there. But there has been a lot of work put into a recycling initiative to actually move us in that direction. And I think, as the commentary states, that the extrapolation of the last few months' recycling rates will mean that next year we will be within those targets. So that's a good indicator. I think the CBD one is puzzling, and we've talked about this on a number of times. If you talk to retailers and look at confidence, if you talk to the retail reference group that Mike Steiner chairs, if you look at the number of new businesses that are moving into the CBD, if you look at the retail spend, all of those measures all correlate to tell you a particular picture. And then you look at the foot traffic count that we're doing, and it tells another picture. And so I think what we have here is an example of something to say, well, before we decide that anything's wrong or anything's right, we really need to try and pull together a better understanding of what is actually happening in here. This is actually, I think, Una, is something that is already underway and has been quite a topic of discussion. The reason that we haven't changed any of these indicators, of course, is that fundamentally we can't, because we're locked into them. As to Manawa, I think the challenge there that we've talked about around the table on many times now is that the contractor has doubled the number of people working on that site to try and keep that project moving forward. And if you look this week at the level of progress that has actually occurred, you'd have to be confident that it will be finished probably towards the middle of this month, and that certainly was where we understand the contractor was now hoping to achieve. The thing that we can't, though, ever count on is the weather. And if we have continued rain days as we have over the last period of time, then we've actually got some challenges. I think from what I understand, the real issue on Manawa has been that the contractor has been required to lay grout underneath the pavers going over the concrete surface. They can't be just placed there and sand placed on them. They have to be grouted into place to cope with traffic. And that can't be done in the rain. And that's been the fundamental hold-up with the main structure and through the middle of the intersection. Hopefully that is actually now moving past us, because if you look at it today, most of the roading surface has actually been completed now. So I think that gives some level of confidence that we won't be having this project still working on through the December and certainly that January trading period.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kent.
On that, in that response, I have to say that I have asked on each occasion when these falling CBD figures have come up that we have an investigation as to why and some answers. So please, can we set a time limit on this, because this has been going on for over 2 years now.
Time limit on.
Getting a report back as to why the pedestrian counts are falling. If we are doing an investigation to find out why the pedestrian foot traffics are conflicting with other parameters that we're measuring, there should be a reason. It should not be too difficult to actually find out what that reason is. I have now asked for it for over 1.5 years.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Please don't debate across the table. Chief Executive Officer?
I think that we can bring back the staff involved. I think that the question is, what is the right KPI to actually set for the next 12 months with regards to CBD improvement? That's the key consideration that we have to set, and that will be a debate in the LTP workshop that we need to have.
But it doesn't matter what the KPI is set at. It is the falling trend that we need to investigate, not whether the figure is right or wrong. We have a continued falling trend. However, I will move on from that to my second area of concern, which is in terms of, we've done some major restructuring in terms of consenting. and we've put on additional staff to cope with the additional workload, and I appreciate that. But there's some concern to me that we're only still achieving 10% of consents processed within the 15 working day statutory limit for subdivisions, and only 2%, 10% for land use, and only 2% for subdivisions. Surely we can do better than that if we've put on more staff and we've improved our method of doing it. Or have we not got it right yet?
Are you there, Henry?
Tucked in behind you.
Good on you, Henry.
Mr. Chair. Look, it's a fair question, and I think from our point of view, we have been caught a bit by the volume. It's one of those positive and negative stories. The volume has been just hugely more significant, but we acknowledge also that we need to improve our processes. We think we've probably got the people on the ground, but the process we need to look at, and particularly in terms of electronic lodgement, is something that's coming through quite strongly. But we're certainly going to be focusing on streamlining our process even more this year, because hopefully the new numbers are the new norm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question before I make a comment in response, I think, to some of the other comments that are made. The NRB survey, how is that conducted? How do they actually contact people?
By what you just heard, a phone. Yep. And,
So a
I think it's
landline?
to landlines, yes.
Landline.
I
yeah.
think we accept the fact that it's probably a method of the past,
Yep.
and we are looking, obviously, when we reset our KPIs in the next LTP, as to is there a different way of trying to gauge this satisfaction rather than doing that. But at the moment, it is the tool that we currently are using.
Yeah, and thank you for that answer, and I think it's an outdated tool. I was in a forum recently with some young business people who said, who in this room has a landline, and one hand went up. So that answers part of the question. In terms of participating, and the Chief Executive's comment about the challenges Solgum face with youth indicating they want to participate in decision making, participation is a two-way street. If you want to participate in decision making, you actually have to get up there and participate, not just say you want to. The jury's still out until the specials are counted, but the youthquake didn't happen by all accounts with the election. So, what's the most basic way of participating is exercise your democratic vote at election time. CBD car parks and foot traffic is an interesting one. For me, it's a bit like Airbnb and guest nights. Chuck it out and work on electronic card spend in the CBD. That's your true indicator of economic activity, business turnover in the CBD. Because around this town, with the way the parking regime is, you can drive and pretty much park right outside your destination, your shopping destination, in and out. And I know people that do that on a regular basis. So traffic up and down the footpath is not really an indicator of how many people are conducting their business and turning up in the CBD. If we got rid of all cars from the CBD, then we would certainly see the foot traffic soar. So, my chief concern out of all of this is capability of the organisation, and I think that's what we're struggling to cope with. It's a very competitive employment environment out there, and getting the right staff and retaining them is a challenge for the organisation. That's my view, but those are my few thoughts, Mr. Chair.
I think something that probably people have forgotten, because it was something that in 2013, we had large numbers of seating bays around the city. We had complaints from the inner city focus group about large numbers of young people gathering in these spaces. We had a large bus stop, one depot terminus in Pukewatua Street. Now all of that has changed, and So we no longer, in fact, after the first year, when those retailers who were asked about was there still a problem, they couldn't even remember the problem they had complained about. Because we had fixed the problem of large groups of people gathering, not spending, but just gathering, by changing our seating. And that's still an ongoing issue. I think for retailers, and Helium Gallery is a very good example. They had a site on Tutanakai Street. They've now moved to Hinimore Street. Now they have far fewer people walk past their door and their sales have soared. Because before, they had a lot of people who were not spending. They were simply migrating from the mall up to that part of Tutanakai Street. Now they have shoppers, so most of the retailers I have spoken to, they're not really concerned how many people walk past their shop. They're more concerned to what translates to sales within their shop. And all of those businesses are doing well, which is why we've now seen Hinimoa Street, which was a completely dead street, virtually full. So I think you can pick numbers. Really, for most people, we will see an increase. The summer months, the weather has an enormous amount to do with it, and so does our gathering mechanism, which has just been discussed. So to isolate that as a trend that tells us something, for me it tells us that our mechanism of counting it is inaccurate, that our previous standards for measuring it were not measuring people necessarily who were spending money, they were just happened to be hanging around. And they may well have been measuring those walking to and from our one and only bus depot. Now, I'm not saying that's the answer, but I'm saying that that could go some way to answering some of those queries about that particular trend. And I think that for me, that's not something I look at. I look at the happiness of the retailers, I look at the economic spend of the retailers, I look at the improvement, the huge improvement in business confidence and the enormous development that's happening both within our city and without, and the number of people moving here. That's a far greater indicator. And Dave's right. We can still park outside the shop we want to go to. And if you want to, you can get in your car and you can drive 800 metres around the corner and park outside the next shop. In any other city, they'd laugh at you. A, you couldn't do it. B, it would cost you too much. You'd never find a park anyway, and you'd walk. So when our city is that busy, we'll see far more people on the street. I guarantee it.
We need to review whether the KPIs are relevant. Even Her Worship said maybe that it's not the right tool to use. So I think this debate needs to come up in the LGP. The next speaker is Mr. Masani Tule, followed by Mayor Chadwick, and then Mr. Martin, and then, Councillor Kuma, welcome. Councillor Kuma, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, kia ora. Yeah, quick comment. I've opened 2 businesses in Hinimore Street, right next to Helium. So Digital Base Camp has very few people walking past. But just across the road, Digital Natives Academy has lots of people walking past. It's the same 25 metres on different sides of the same street. Lots of people know people, I don't know. So you can argue there's not enough, I can argue there's too many, and we'll both be right and we'll both be wrong. So I think we need to keep discussing this. But my question is more on page 27. Develop policy, bylaws and plans, and down to the Class 4 gambling and board venue policy. It was not delivered within its statutory time frame, although the policy is scheduled to be heard by Council on the 27th of July 2017. Can I get an update on that, please?
Mr. Colley?
I think, as Her Worship said, I think we've done it. But
Yeah,
at the time of 30th of June 2017, which was the end of the financial year that these relate to, it hadn't been completed yet. Yep. So it is just a snapshot in time. Yep.
Mr. Martin, Your Worship, the Mayor. Rather than a lecture?
Rather not comment, actually. It was going to be a bar back about irrelevant measures, and I was asking honestly, Councillor Kent, do you come into town very often? Because we're in there and I see so much activity. I see new businesses coming in, and I see a confidence. Even with Manawa last week, I was in a shop right next door who said, we're prepared to wait, and I'm as frustrated at you about the weather. I want to see that finished, but I don't blame council for that. And we ought to be looking at what we're doing about climate change mitigation, actually, because that's the big issue that we're facing ahead of us as a council. But I just see vibrancy, and I see businesses feeling confident. That's what really matters, not people walking. And I do wonder about people on their bikes too, because I see more people biking around. And that's a wonderful thing. So, and we don't even have a bike count. So we should be asking ourselves, what do we measure?
On your bike. Mr Martin.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Yeah, I'm delighted with the comments around the table because I believe it sparked us up to make some calls. Are we doing the right things? Are we doing the wrong things? But while I'm sitting around this table, Mr Chairman, and I look at governance, and we've got a red stripe beside us of saying 3 and not achieving, that upsets me because I believe I'm part of governance if I'm sitting on this committee, and we've got to do better. So I'm putting a challenge out to all our councillors around the table here, including myself and my cousins across the road there. We've got to think smarter. We can't blame the weather. We've got to take all those things on board. And all I'm asking is that let's have a look at it. Perhaps we need to change the policies, the way we ask the actual questions on the survey. But at the end of the day, it says here, audited report. And as of from tomorrow, if we pass this, it's forgotten. But they'll always read audited report, governance you didn't achieve. So that's where I'm coming from, and I think we've done a pretty good job of listening around the table here and speaking to it. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
And Mr Kumar finally. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Thought you'd never see me putting my hands up, but thank you. True. I think a good performance indicator for how the town is doing, as opposed to what the KPI is saying, is the amount of places they're looking for people to work in at the moment. If businesses were down and struggling, then we wouldn't see so much employment opportunities, and lots of places sign apply within, or they're putting ads now. So there's some good growth at the moment. And the other thing I think we're missing is that there's a lot of online shopping as well. The younger ones are just not coming into town. Anyone that's 30 and under are doing it online, and they're not walking, but they're still probably coming to pick stuff up and having their parcels delivered and stuff. There's more courier vehicles in town now than there ever was. That's an indication that things are on the move, things are on the go. You walk around the city, it's looking good, buzzing. Unfortunately, as we just keep using the weather word, and that's to nobody's fault or detriment, it is what it is, as Seinfeld says. And hopefully in the next couple of months, when the sun is shining and the tulips, chrysanthemums, daffodils, whatever's in the air, everyone's more vibrant and happy. And also this KPI is probably done at the wrong time as well. It's not reflective of what the current situation is.
Councillor Kumar, it's been moved and seconded and carried. Now I'd like to turn to page 36, which is the financial performance for the 2 months ended 31st of August. Mr Collar, you have a presentation, do you, on this? Or?
Thank you, Chair. No presentation, just a couple of quick comments, I guess, with regards to an overview. From an operating perspective, revenues are slightly ahead of budget by about 160,000, mainly on the back of rating revenues and fees and charges being ahead. But that's being offset by operating expenses being over budget. And that's predominantly down to electricity charges, which for the month of July and August were extremely high due to the time of the year, the lack of rain in certain places, and the spot price of electricity absolutely climbing, as you can imagine, during those winter months. So that's just hit us a little bit hard as well in that period, but has now dropped and will not be an ongoing issue going forward. So other than that, just any questions?
Mr Pautoa Pasani Tule.
Kia ora, Thomas. Yeah, just about the power bill. Gosh, are we mitigating this? How are we mitigating this? Hoping that it doesn't happen again as in litigation.
No, I've actually looked at the 3-year trend, and it's actually very similar every year. So part of it is just down to some phasing of some budgets. So our spend in July, August is actually very similar to the previous 2 years before that. So it's not an ongoing issue. It's just at that time of year, it's when the South Island, the line from the South Island to the North Island sends a lot of power. And at that time, while it was extremely wet, there was not a lot of wet in the hydro lakes. And so while you and I would have thought hydroelectricity would have been cheap, the spot price did climb. And as a result, now that the winter's come off, that demand's come off, and rain has hit in those areas, we've seen the spot price reduce significantly back to where we expected it to be.
So we'll have to anticipate this next year and the year after. Is this just going to be a continual trend that we have to prepare for?
I think this winter blip always seems to happen, but I guess to put it into perspective, February, March of this year as well, we saw a much higher increase as well, and that was as a result of those 2 cyclones coming through, the extra stormwater pumping, all those sorts of things. So, dare I say it, climate change may be impacting us, Your Worship, and we do have to anticipate that, but overall, we are much better off currently acquiring our electricity on the spot market than going to a fixed price agreement. So we're still probably $300,000 to $400,000 cheaper as a result. And sometimes, though, you've got to accept that there's a blip, and it's offset during those other times. Yep.
Tapsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think that actually answers the question I was going to say, which is this a seasonal trend, and is this something we should expect in future? And climate change has been brought up quite a bit, and I do think that's an issue we really need to have on our radar. But yeah, I think my question's already been answered. Thank you.
Gould.
Chairman, thank you, Thomas, for your report. On page 37, you've got finance expense and variance is $110,000. Does that mean the interest charge has been going up from the banks you've been dealing with?
No, that means we're a little bit favourable for the year, so we're actually not paying as much interest as we expected for the year. Interest rates for us haven't really increased, so I think I've mentioned in the past we've got about $40 million maturing to be going back, and that will actually reprice itself from currently we're paying in the 6% on that 40 million, and we'll be repricing into the high 3s, low 4s. So we'll actually see an even further reduction in savings on interest costs this year, assuming nothing catastrophic happens in those markets between now and when we need to reprice.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to see that after 2 months we are actually operating with our operating revenue exceeding our operating expenditure, and I would like to think that that can continue throughout the year.
Mr. Colley, you're on track. Thank you. You will. I haven't even said what I want you to move yet. What would you like to move?
Recommendation number 2 on page 36, that we discuss what we've already discussed.
That the report financial performance for the 2 months ended 31st of August 2017 be received. Move Councillor Gould, seconded Councillor Kawatate. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Now on page 39, and we're moving along quite famously. I'd like Stavros to come to the front, and Una, if you'd just like to give us a brief overview while Stavros is coming to the front desk.
Good morning, members. So I'd just like to highlight 2 comments that were made in the previous report. One of them was on the capability of our organisation, and the second one was our progress towards our direction. So this report that is now in front of you, titled Vision 2030 Big Moves and Key Projects, is going to be hopefully a way going forward in which we can continually show and put the spotlight a bit on those big moves and key projects, and be able to bring back to you how those projects are progressing, what key milestones that they have achieved, and what you will see coming up in the next milestones to be achieved. So This report will be on a rotational basis. It will be based on pieces of work that are relevant and have information and highlights and achievements to recommend at the time, and that we also envision that hopefully in the next report we'll have a snapshot of all of the projects from the PMO office, and just to be able to give a bit of an overall context of where the projects are at. So for this month, we've just got an update on the rural waste services and the Rotorua Rotorua projects, and Stavros and Tim are just going to highlight there. Thank you.
Next month, what you're saying, Unan, is next month we'll roll over to another 2 major projects, and through the process of this committee, we'll get continual updates on these major projects. I think that's awesome. Stavros, would you like to, good morning, lead us into this?
Good morning, everybody. I just want to briefly cover the rural waste services to keep everyone up to date where we are. So back in April and May 2017, we went out with the annual report, not annual report, annual plan for consultation. And in that, we had some proposals for the rural community about what services that we would provide them. The feedback from the rural community was the proposals that we put forward weren't acceptable for them, but they wanted to continue to work with council to develop new proposals. And this was approved by council in June 2017. So since then, I've been working with the Rural Community Board, our contractor Smart Environmental, and doing some workshops out in the rural community to develop some proposals of new services. So the main feedback we've been having from the Nakuru, Waikiri, Kaito and Rotorua services is that they want to develop a curbside service, the same as what we have in town. So we're aiming to go out to informal consultation with them over the next couple of weeks, start that process, and go to each of those communities and actually ask them, out of the 3 options that we've got in the report, what option do they want? So we've narrowed it down to the first option is to have the full service the same as what you have in town, around the lakes, at Kaito already, at Rotorua already. Option 2 is to look at a reduced service, so only a fortnightly collection. And option 3 is just to obviously carry on as we are, not providing a community service to those areas. The aim of this is to allow us to develop the long-term plan going forward. So when we go out for the consultation with the long-term plan in 2018, we would be able to indicate what services we'd be aiming to have. Then we could have a discussion around the revenue streams. Should we charge the rural community a higher premium? Do we have a differential so they cover the cost of the service? Or do we do as we agreed last year and make it a level playing field that everyone pays the same for the same service across the community? Any questions?
I just seek the assurance that both the Lakes and the Rural Board have been actively involved in the development of the 3 options, or is this the first time they've seen them?
So I've been working with the Rural Community Boards since July on these. So I've met with Mr. Martin, Shirley, and we've been developing it. I've been going out to the rural communities alongside the Rural Community Board, so they've been alongside us the whole way. Majority of them, most probably about 90% of the properties we'd be looking at are in the rural community zone, not the lakes area.
Your comment you made, and I agree with it, is the flat fee option right across the district. If you do the Kaito, Rotorua, Nakuru, Waikiri Valley service, does that mean to say those areas where people take the stuff to, the centres will close, or will they still be available?
I presume you discuss the transfer stations at Rotorua. At the moment, we are not proposing closing any transfer stations at all. I think what the next step through the LTP, as we've discussed around KPIs and things like that, is to actually review whether they should be kept open, should they develop to benefit the community in other ways. I think there's a place for them for the large bulky items, especially in places like Rotorua. but there's a discussion to be had around the future of those transfer stations going forward.
Further to my question about the Lakes Community Board, do we assume, because you've worked with the Rural Board, that the Lakes Board is completely happy about their solutions for waste management? I know we went out and said we've got to try and solve the rural sector, but a lot of Lakes community also see themselves as rural, really, small.
I thought that had been solved, but Tim, could you
Yeah,
respond,
can you just
please?
So the communities that fall underneath the Lakes Community Board all currently receive a service, have access to the service. So the only change would be there'd be one or two outliers within those Lakes communities, so we're talking about one or two properties. If the Lakes Community Board, I think Mr. Stanton would be a good member to be able to say whether they approve where we're going forward, or Mr. Thomas.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm just coming, Stavros indicated it might be worthwhile me making a comment. I think Tim's right, we have addressed most of the issues around the lakes. However, the board would like to keep discussing options, especially around summer collection services and stuff like that with Stavros and with Tim. And I've just sent Tim an email actually yesterday suggesting we get together to start exploring those options.
Hotspots during the summer months?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for adding that through. Stavros?
Mr. Chair, just very briefly, team explained, the process we are. I would just like to sort of, make a couple of comments. One comment is that we do have a 2030, strategy, which anticipates or aspires to make this district an attractive destination for people. Consistent with that, obviously, the way we manage our waste, is significant. We believe that with regards to rural communities, the current practice of burying waste into individual properties or burning waste in individual properties is not consistent with strategic direction. And obviously, we are driven by that ambition to bring all the district into in a proper waste collection management system. And the second element, which is subject to the LTP, it is the way we recognize that there will be increased costs for the rural section simply because of the density and the disbursement of these properties compared to the urban section. And it's up to elected members to decide how you want to distribute, how to account for those costs in the LTP, and we'll come to you with some suggestions in due time. But we think that it strategically is aligned with our objectives to make this district compliant in terms of waste management. Thank you.
The question, and I'm glad we're going out to the community, but I find option 3 a bit unpalatable. I know why it's there, but the issue, and in no way am I saying this comes from the rural sector, but the issue that is vexatious to us all as a whole district is fly tipping. Which option here do you think would have the greatest impact on fly tipping, or none? It's a cost per household, but you must have looked at other areas around New Zealand that have the same challenge that we have. And it can be visitors, I know that.
Your Worship, I think I think the fortunate reality is that most of flight tipping takes place in areas where they already receive curbside collection.
Yep.
And I've got to be frank about it. It's sheer laziness. There's no excuse for people not to put their waste, to be collected properly. And our experience is that out of the 100 tons of flight tipping collected every year, the vast majority of them comes from areas where they actually have a curbside collection.
Yeah, thank you.
Observations are 100% correct. The latest incident outside the landfill, opposite the landfill, on iwi land, has been tracked to Taupo from a building site in Taupo, and police have been involved in that. So I share your concern, Your Worship. I just wondered, Stavros, when we're doing our waste, if we include the cost in the cost in the rates, that they'll get the same cost as it'll be a standard fee across the district. If, just to assist, because I know we've got 37% of people in the Rotorua district who are rental properties. They have the same access to recycling bins as anybody else, but the stuff that doesn't fit in the recycling bins, that's what's getting fly dumped. Tyres, wood, timber, steel, corrugated iron, those sorts of things. I just wanted to add an extra cost, say it was $5 per property, that each rate-paying property got one ticket a year to take a trailer load of rubbish to the landfill. I think that would have a huge impact on reducing the fly tipping, because these people leave these properties and they say, well, what am I going to do with this? So they go down Paradise Valley and dump it in the lay-by, and it's still happening, even though our staff went out there and cleared all that, opened it up so you could see it from the road, and it's still happening on a weekly basis. So I just wondered, just a suggestion from the community that I've had, that if you gave everybody one free ticket, and for example, if Stevie had a whole lot of stuff at her place that she wanted to dump, and I wasn't using my ticket, I could transfer my ticket to her so that her volumes could increase, so that we didn't. She'd say, oh, I own one trailer, I've got 3 trailers, so I'll take one trailer load out, but I'll dump the other 2. So, you know, I think some flexibility. I just wondered whether you had considered that, and the community I'm hearing are prepared to pay, but they can't pay $40 or $25 a trailer load to go out to the landfill at the moment.
Mr. Chair, I mean, obviously that is a part and parcel of your consideration for levels of services and the funding revenue policy in the LTP, and certainly we can canvass this issue, and council, in your wisdom, will make some decisions in due course. Thank you.
And that's consistent. I think it's the right place to have the discussion, but people know that we're on a sustainability journey. I think it's that and the e-waste. If the e-waste collection it's the computers, the laptops, the cell phones, the sort of heavy items, and that's something that I'd like consideration to be given to too. I still do like, I know it's a cost to council, so therefore it's a cost to ratepayers, but I do like that one free day for those that then you've got just no excuse, and you've covered the field. You've got recycling systems in the rural, the lakes, town, but we're trying to cover absolutely everything. And I think we've done wonderfully so far with the implementation. Yeah, it's an amazing volume that you're getting back, but when we feel like we're never there with behavioural change, and I do want to congratulate you too for the school children that I hear now that they're living with me, all about the waste. So I hear about the waste stream constantly from my grandchildren, and I think that's fantastic. That's where the change comes. And so they're involved with Monica and others going into the classroom. That's where we'll change laziness. But it's all aspects that you need in an integrated plan. So well done, and we'll just still be talking about this issue, I think, for quite some time.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your support. I mean, I've seen in the community, by having community gardens, what that's done to kids. You've now got New World giving out little pots. They've come on board and realised there's a need within the community for kids to learn how to grow things, so I think that's great. Mr. Potoa?
Yeah, just adding to this discussion, I've had family from Auckland come down, and they say once a year there's like the big dump. People put things out on the front. Have you seen that? I drive past once a year, and they just put everything out on the front, and the council just takes it. It looks hideous to me, but everyone that lives in Auckland appreciates that you can move things, because not everyone has a car, gas, or a trailer. And now you're creating a black market economy with all of these traded chits. I don't know. Just, that's not my suggestion. My question was, can we please receive a list? I like the new format of the Vision 2030, but could we get a list of the next 8 projects that are coming up so we can plan with some certainty, please?
Yes, that can be done. As I said when I introduced this, next time round we will actually have a sort of a schedule of those key projects, so you'll be able to see what they are and where their progress is at a high level, and then the report will dive down into some of the actual activity and progress that's happening on those projects.
Una actually sought the support of Tony and myself as chair and deputy. Otherwise, your agenda just gets bogged down with so many items, and we wanted some in-depth discussion on these two in particular, so we could give some way ahead, and it's happened. So, has anyone got any questions on the East Rotorua sewerage scheme? Oh, Mr. Martin? Oh, you're still on the waste stream. Okay, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Rural Board's had some very good discussions with Tim and Stavros over a period of time. We think we're formulating a program that will be acceptable out there. But one thing that we do stand by is we would like to see a uniform charge throughout the district. We're quite, I won't say adamant about it, but we're very strong about it in that aspect. To compromise that reduction in cost, perhaps the option 2 is where you pick it up only once a fortnight and not once a week. So there's this perhaps saving in the truck there. If you're going to do that, perhaps we need to increase one of the wheeling bins or both wheelie bins to 240 litres, not a 140. And the bottle one is a joke. I'll be honest with you, I know what's happening at Nongataha, and I still run the recycling centre at Nongataha, and the amount of bottles we get in 2 hours going through to that waste recycling centre at Nongataha is incredible. So we're not far away, and it's our job to go out there, as I believe as a rural board, which we're doing, to try and convince the people. But there's a myth out there that we're all farmers. We're not. There's a tremendous amount of lifestylers and smaller blocks that come into the same category, and if they think they're going to have to pay 330 or 270 because they don't have really the same amount of content as what farmers do, we've got another problem on our hands. So, Chairman, what is a significant problem, though, is it has been touched in one of the paragraphs here, is the waste that comes from the RAP from hay bales and silage bales. Once upon a time we were working with Environment BOP and it seems to have disappeared. There is a tremendous amount of it's been buried, and there's a tremendous amount of it still blowing around in the paddocks, and at a certain time of the year they say you can actually burn it. Well, we don't want to burn it. So that is a major problem that we've got to address. There's one other thing I'd like to point out. The cost of sending a truck in a straight line and picking up at a distance apart between the bins is a hell of a lot cheaper than actually stopping every 10 metres going up a residential road. The wear and tear on trucks is tremendous where you stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. So that sort of thing's got to be brought into consideration as well, maintenance of vehicles and costs of vehicles. And Tim is doing that, and he's doing it very well. So that's where we are. We want to join, and I'm talking more south. North is virtually joined up now. They want to join. They want to be part of it, but let's have a look at the costs. And Tim is working through it, and he's doing a good job.
Tim,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll give you an opportunity to make a comment. Response, because we know you have been doing a fabulous job.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison's right. There is a lot of issues around items such as silage wrap, triple rinse, pesticide and herbicide containers, and this is just a step towards trying to resolve those issues. So historically there is farm pits which do get burnt, and obviously with Waikiri Valley it's slowly becoming more and more diverting away from farms. More and more people come into the area from, whether it's Nelson, from Auckland, the lifestylers, and they have an expectation that they do have a service. So it's an opportunity for them to have the conversation, and through the LTP we'll be looking at other issues as well.
Issue that Mr. Martin raised regarding the baling twine and the baling plastic, what's the arrangement there? I understood he was right, that EBOT was dealing with that issue. Have you any comment on that?
I'm not aware too much of what's going on with Bay of Plenty Regional Council around that. It's gone quite quiet over the last few years. There has been an issue of being able to ship it abroad, where a few areas do, because of the silage or the baleage that's still attached to it is a biohazard as far as the community that receives it is concerned. So there are people around investigating this, such as Environment Canterbury, and doing large-scale projects. And if they are successful, then we'll be able to join on to those and see how we can roll out for our communities.
Rest of what's happening in
Yes.
that forum. Councillor Kent, finally, we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to raise the issue of the recycling bins themselves, the little blue ones. Other places I've lived where, for example, you have a fortnightly collection like this, in a larger family, that size bin is not necessarily nearly enough. As a result, a lot of recycling stuff is going in the ordinary rubbish bin. Has any thought been given to allowing larger properties to apply to council to have a second recycling bin for free and just put it out? Because I think that would actually help for the sake of a few extra bins around the place. I don't think the impact in terms of cost would remotely outweigh.
Talking general rubbish or?
No, just the recycling bin. For example, in my area, there are several families there who, quite honestly, are having difficulty keeping their wine bottles to within the limit of the bin over a 2-week period.
If some weird neighbours. God, we hardly fill ours up a month. And we're winos. Okay. Any comments, Tim?
Any customer can apply to Smart and pay for an extra bin, whether that is a rubbish bin upgrade to a 240 litre. They can purchase another bin, recycling bin off Smart if they want to, because they have a lot of recycling. Same with a crate. If council wants to take up the cost, that's something that we can definitely look into. If that makes people's life easier to be able to recycle more, then we can have a look at those costs and come back to council.
The other question I've had, Tim, is when are we going to take the next step and have a green bin?
That will be a discussion with around the long-term plan. We are investigating options around organic waste, whether it's food waste or green waste, as that makes up approximately about 50% of the rubbish in our red bins. So when we go through the LTP process, that would be something we'll be raising and work with the community with.
Excellent. Sounds like you've got all bases covered. Wonderful. Okay, we'll move on. Can I have a mover and a second to the report Vision 2030? Big moves, key projects, updates be received. Oh, just before we move on, are there any questions on East Rotorua? Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With page 42, number 3, next steps, I know it's the 5th of October. I take it there's no appeals on both those submissions?
No?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the Rotorua resource consent appeal period closed on the 26th of September. The consent has been granted and is uncontested. There's no appeals.
Excellent. Good question.
We are now extremely busy to implement the project of building the Rotorua reticulation system and the wastewater treatment plant on how many 932B. We need to finish on or about substantially by the end of this financial year in order to secure the $4.5 million from the Ministry of Health. We have an extremely tight time schedule. We have a significant body of work to be done between now and then, and we are working together with the local iwi in terms of cultural impact in our team and local residents to make sure that we comply with those kind of time frames. And we're quite confident that with the right goodwill and the recognition that the Rotorua scheme has recognized, perhaps in a unique way in New Zealand, the cultural sensitivities is by installing pre-treatment systems in all the households, in addition to the central wastewater treatment plant. we think that, we have met the significant concerns of the iwi in terms of transmission of untreated sewage to the treatment plant. But of course, those pre-treatment systems require some detail, significant amounts of detailed work on each individual property as to where they go exactly in the property, how they connect to the system, how they get pumped into the treatment plant. So as I said earlier, it is an extremely period of the next 6 to 8 months to install the system to comply with timeframes.
Thank you. Worship.
I think that is phenomenal news. And the formation of the council in 2013 was a direct result of Justice Miller's findings. And the way that we do things now is entirely different. And that is a great acknowledgement to the Working Party. And I would also like to acknowledge Councillor Donaldson's input in the Working Party and yourselves, because that has been hours and hours and hours of work, and I know Phil Thomas has been part of it, and it's and Ian McLean, the chair, to be congratulated. Look, it has taken from 2013 to hear this news today, but it shows that if you do things the right way, with the right people around the table, we can get a profound result which augurs well for the rest of this council's term. And I congratulate you, Jeff, too. Look, this is huge. This is the best news today. And this, for those that have been involved in this, it's been such a long journey. And I know at times the regional council themselves have said, why can't you just get on with it and do it quickly? You can't do things like this quickly. They must be right for our communities with the right people, feeling that we've got the best result possible. So that's fantastic news and well done. And by golly, it'll be great when it's opened. It'll be an amazing day. But that is good news about our Vision 2030 and sustainability and lakes water quality. So well done.
Your Worship, are you happy to move that the report Vision 2030, Big Moves, Key Projects, Updates be received, and a vote of thanks to the staff involved in the Rotorua sewerage scheme, bringing it to its to hopefully its final conclusion. Your comments, Stavros, and yours, Your Worship, about talking to the key people, because we didn't, it cost us over $1 million. Yeah. So in 2013, we changed the way we spoke to people. But that's been at your feet, Tim, and yours too, Stavros, that you have engaged with the right people, with respect, with Ian's help, with the community board's help, and of course, Councillor Donaldson. So you all to be congratulated. So we'd like to add to the, and I'll second it, add to the motion and a vote of thanks to the staff involved in getting this project together under trying circumstances, are to be congratulated. I have a mover and a second. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We're making great progress, you guys. Page 43, the operational report.
That's wonderful news.
Oh, I know. That's why I put that added that amendment on. Okay. 43, the operational report for August, September. Someone like to move that the operational report for May to June be received. Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Gould. All those in favour, please say aye. So we have the report in 5 sections, and the first one is our respected Kaitiaki Māori and Mr. Morrison, welcome.
Morena, Mr. Chair, morena, councillors. So my report is there for the period May to June, as noted on the front page for the period is there. I'll take it as read. I just want to report that those of you may have noticed that the Tatau Pounamu is in its box and has been there for a little while now. So it's been a long journey from January through to the 25th of May to today. But pleasingly, it is there. Just highlight that. And probably the only thing that's not there, which I want to highlight, of course, which has been in the media, is the appointment of our Chair Māori, Gina Rangi. So we're talking with her at the moment. I have met with her, and looking at a start date for her to then be welcomed in along with other staff.
Staff appointments of the Chief Executive Officer's role. Could you just explain to us what is her role? I'm sure there'll be questions, or maybe the Chief Executive Officer, both of you, just to advise what is this new person's role.
Through the Chair, if I can pick that up. Effectively, with the establishment of the Te Tato Board, there was a parallel expectation that the organisation would develop a level of greater capability to respond in an appropriate way and to really enter into dialogue with iwi at a level that we haven't actually in the past. And I think the importance of that has just been highlighted in the Rotorua Rotorua project. So what Gina Rangi's role will be to look at the organisation and to work beside effectively the executive team to actually further that ability to work and engage appropriately with iwi.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you for that. Any questions of Monty? Questions, Your Worship?
Thank you for the report, Monty. Do you know when we're going to receive the report from Te Tato on the Rotorua business case to go to Te Puni Kōkiri? Because that's going to be something that needs to be lodged hot off the blocks with the formation of whatever the government will be. And the other comment was, I'm on the governance and strategy group of Local Government New Zealand, and it has been noted that Rotorua has now got the ability to attract people of such high calibre as Gina Rangi to that group. And that raises the next issue about who should represent Rotorua on the Te Maruata governance group, iwi governance group that is formed now in Local Government New Zealand. Is it Te Tato from Te Taru from Te Tato or Te Arawa? Who would be best to be represented on behalf of Rotorua on that group? At the moment, I think, and she's not here, but it's pretty, Councillor Rokawa Tate's there, but we don't have anyone from Te Tato or Te Arawa. And actually, that may be a gap that we need to look at going forward. But well done on the appointment, and it was noted in Wellington. Goodness me, you're attracting some very high calibre people to positions on Rotorua Lakes Council.
Thank you. Yes, if I can respond firstly to the first point you made, the progress on an update on the Rotorua strategy planning. I know that Te Tato recently had a meeting and the issue was discussed. Of course, we're in a bit of a hiatus at the moment because of the elections, but the work with Te Puni Kōkiri is ongoing. The other and the second part of that, in terms of your comments and attracting, yes, I think the Chief Executive Jeff mentioned at the last meeting with the number of quality applicants that we had for the position that Gina has been appointed to. And I think the phrase was we probably would appoint any one of 8 of the 17 who applied would be good in this organisation. So I think that's really a major success for all of us who have been involved, yourselves as councillors, and setting a vision which is inclusive of Māori, which is building competence in Māori. And certainly the Sorghum conference last week, I was approached by many from around the country and asking more about the Te Aroha partnership, and acknowledging that at the pōheri for Sorghum on Thursday, all of us, all staff and councillors who were there, gave the pōheri to the rest of New Zealand, and that's a significant statement to make. So thank you.
Maxwell.
And I'll touch on the one on that Her Worship the Mayor mentioned about Te Maruata, which is the committee, national committee around the country for elected members, or I think people from even Te Arawa Tātou Board are eligible. Porto and I went to one of the conferences held in Manukau about March, April this year, but last Friday they did have a meeting in Wellington, and we received a pānui to attend, but it clashed with something else that I had 2 weeks ago, so none of us kind of could go down. But I think they are wanting to form a national body again from current members, so I haven't had a chance to catch up with Merapeka and Tania and our other people from Te Arawa, because I think it is important that we be represented on that body. It is important. Our local government. And I just want to mention, can I ask a question? Monty, can you give me an update? I've been waiting for the pānui to come out that the America's Cup's going to be brought here on the waka down at Ohenamatu next week or week after or sometime.
Sorry, on Monday, that's coming Monday the 9th, between 5 and 7 p.m, the America's Cup will be taken to an event really being coordinated by the Yacht Club or the Rotorua Water Sports Club. The plan is to take the cup from there by boat around to a landing point by Ohenamatu in front of Tonohoku there in the marae in the bay, and then walk it through the crowd that is going there up onto Tamata Kapua, where it will receive a full-on pōhiri, and then an exchange of speeches. I know that the Mayor is on the list to speak, and then photographs for all of those who want to be there. Obviously security is a major issue, and so yes, so the invitations have gone out, the posters have gone out, so if anyone wants any more information, I'm happy to share. I had a thought that there's a committee headed by Bruce Davey, and Auntie Norma Sturley and Shiloh Mitchell are our Ngāti Whakaia representatives coordinating that part of it. Our council staff are part of that as well, part of Henry's team, are also working with him. So yes, so a large crowd is expected, 5 to 7, Monday the 9th.
So does get an invite? Because I know Councillor Kent's a sailor of old. You're welcome.
Well, look, what I could do is I'll share the information with Megan and she could send it out.
From a sport and recreational point of view that we should have been told about this. Okay. Any further questions, Peitawa?
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora e te rangatira. Just wanted to also acknowledge that another young Māori boy has come to work for council. So at the high level and at the ground level, we're happy to see young Māori coming through into the staffing ranks. But also the Te Arawa Sports Awards were held recently. What's the council's involvement with the Te Arawa Sports Awards? I know it's a great day for rangatahi and for Te Arawa, but I'm not quite sure.
I saw it streamed live on the internet, but I from a sport and recreation board, I don't know whether Rob would like to comment, but I wasn't involved whatsoever, which to be honest, I was disappointed in, because they are on our advisory group, and I think it's important that it's tātou on both sides of the fence. Councillor Maxwell?
Yeah, I could help with a bit of information there. It was held last Friday evening at Te Puia, and it always is packed, and I think that's why sponsors get invited. So I went along there with my hat as with NZCT, a great evening that goes from 5:30 to 11:30 at night. So if you've got stamina, you can sit through all those. But it's because it's wonderful achievement by a lot of young people and not so young. But a smoke-free, alcohol-free, and a great evening. But I think Paula, who's the chairman, or Perry Marks is the chair, but I know that they're very tight on only a certain amount of sponsorship passes I could get anyway. So I know it is very tight, but I think that would be good to talk to.
Council involved in the sponsorship of any of the awards?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could add to Trevor's comment, the answer is no. And I add with my Ngāti Whakaia hat on, I don't even have visibility on it, but I made note of it at the time last week in talking with Pihopa. Pihopa gets an invite, and of course, because it's conditioned, it just stays there. So the answer is it's on my radar to talk to Paul Hurihanga.
Great drama. Any other questions? Okay, right. The next one is the Big Moves project. Portia's here. Sorry. Yeah, the strategy group, and Portia's here. She's going to give us a presentation, and we're going to have a library hub update here as well. And yeah, Portia, welcome. And Jane, of course. She's bearing up. Look at the stress. I spoke to Jane before the meeting, and she's certainly really looking forward with anticipation to what is going to be the hub. So, welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Good morning. We just wanted to give you an update of where we're at in terms of funding for the Library and Child Health Hub project. And so here we go. One of the things that we wanted to do with this project was to make a difference for the community. So looking at improving the social dials, and this is really something that we're doing quite outside what other libraries are doing throughout the world. So it's a real special thing that's happening here in Rotorua. And we have, we started off with this and working with the DHB, we knew that we couldn't do it all within the budget that we had allowed. So we've been looking for funding partners to help us along this journey. And working closely with the DHB, we're now under the heading of Te Aka Māori, and we're looking for a holistic view, we're looking to look after the children mainly with this holistic view of their upbringing. So not just about their health, but also about their education and their learning. These are all the people that are involved with us, some of them in terms of giving funding for this project, but others of them who are actually using our resources, our community library, to bring their message to the community. So we have people like Employ New Zealand. They do an awful lot of work helping people getting employment, but people won't go to their offices, so they're coming to the library. So we're providing that meeting point for some of the government agencies and people in the community. The grandparents raising grandchildren, they come in and they meet together so that they can add support for each other, because there's a lot of grandparents out there looking after their grandchildren. Kit McGrath is supporting our Lego clubs, and Plunkett, Rotorua Budget Advisory, all of those actually operate inside our facilities at some time or other. So going forward into our new premises, we'll be able to cater for more of these groups to do the work that they're wanting to do with the community. What we want is to make the building and the service compelling so that they'll come, but we want them to encourage them to stay, to make use of the services, and then to wrap them into what we're doing going forward. So it's a long-term project. This is only the beginning, and Portia's going to talk to you a little bit about where we've got some of this funding from to make it somewhere special.
Okay, morena. I'm just going to take you through some of the exciting, interesting elements that have got the external funding from over the recent months. So one of the first ones is this Fenton Agreement display. This is something that was coming out of our Ngā Mahinga Toi group, our cultural reference group that has been guiding us through the process of designing the library. This is just an example of what it could look like. It's been built by Digital Basecamp. So it's going to display some of that history that you can come up, you can touch, you can zoom in, you can listen to some of the stories, and it's got a carved surrounding that's been carved by local artists as well. Funded by the Rotorua Charitable Trust, and so I'm also working on some additional funding on that as well at the same time. We've got a community meeting room down on the ground floor. This is going to be accessed from the outside as well after library hours, so that other groups can book this room and use it as a facility. This has been fully funded by the Southern Trust. Timber seating outside in Jean Batten Square has been provided with local timber from our local forests, milled locally from Abodo and Donnelly's. So similar to what the seats are looking down in Te Manawa at the moment, big large platform seats. You can sit on the edges, but you can also use them for picnics as well. Upstairs on the second floor there is a quiet reading space that has been funded by Bupa, and also we've got funding from Friends of the Library for magazine shelving, and we've got bespoke file rooms in the Don Stafford room as well, so we've got some really great funding through from them. In Jean Batten Square, we've managed to secure funding from the Francis Moss Board Trust, Raymond Board's a previous mayor, and so that's for funding for all the planting in Jean Batten Square. So that's some really neat stuff coming into there. We've got some great cultural elements, so part of what we're looking to do with Te Aka Māori is make it a welcoming and inviting space that represents Te Arawa and tells those stories. There's a lot of detail in here around those stories that are getting told through the library. The entrance maho is being carved from a local carver, Albert Tapo, who also carved the carvings down at Te Manawa. Yes, so that's underway at the moment. Inside we've got the Potaka Manawa, which is being carved by Shannon Wafer, and it's flanked by two tukutuku panels which are being weaved by local marae as well. Funded at the moment by the Ngāti Whakaui Education Endowment Trust and Pukeroa Orowhata. Inside we've got some really neat David Trowbridge features on the ground floor. These are going to be the pieces on the ground floor that are going to absolutely wow people as you walk in. So in the entranceway you'll look to the right, we've got a double height tree being built. The tree represents Tāne, the strength, using our local timber, and that is being built by David Trowbridge at the moment. Down the other end we've got a giant sculpture that's hanging from the ceiling above the children's area. It's 8 metres by 6 metre sculpture. It represents Tāwhaki and the legend there and that's representing discovery and encouraging children to discover and find information within the library. Both of these pieces are fully funded by the Wright Family Foundation, who came on board. Yeah, so the Wright Family Foundation, it's led by Chloe Wright. It's a private trust. They predominantly fund only not-for-profit organisations around the country. So they just built a new birthing clinic down in Palmerston North, funding everything to do with children and children's development. Love grows brains is their recent campaign. So the reason why Chloe Wright came on board for a council DHB project was the fact that she said, this is amazing to see a council and a DHB actually talking to each other and having a conversation about going forward and you know, making for the well-being of a community is absolutely fantastic. So that was the reason why she came on board. They've funded $272,000 worth of items within the library. Tauranga.
I just want to add to that because Chloe has actually, on top of what she's funded for the building, they've actually come back and they've given a publisher $5,000 for books for children. So she's really invested in this project. She's really very keen on how it is going forward. So we're very excited to be working with her.
People portion just intervening here will be acknowledged in the new building?
Yes, in all different ways, depending on what they've funded. So this is the next thing that the Wright Family Foundation is involved in is what we're calling the community pride space. So on the ground floor behind the tree there is a giant video screen video wall being built. I think it's about 3 metres by 4 metres. We can link in with our sister cities, we can Skype in, we can have large presentations in this space, but also it can actually just show some of the work that's been done in other parts of the library as well. Tiered seating down the other end in the children's space, so this is where kids can sit up with a family member and read a book quietly, or it could actually be a space for where authors come and read stories and storytelling and some of the programs, again funded by the Wright Family Foundation. Now we're getting to some of the more exciting stuff that I'm leaving for you. More exciting. I'm building up. So up on the top floor, on the second floor, we've got a whole space. The whole floor up there is dedicated to discovery and learning and innovation. So we've split it up into 3 parts. We've got the Discovery Centre down one end, which is a giant TV. It's got audio, where we can hold presentations, information. You can learn all sorts of, learn Mandarin. You can do all sorts of programs down that area. But it's also for collaborative study as well. All the spaces up on this floor are funded by the Bay Trust, all the collateral, but then also have gone on to get funding for the programs as well. So we've teamed up the Bay Trust with some funding partners for programs as well. The makerspace, so this is where innovation is starting. So children can come in and learn all sorts of robotic Lego. There's computer programming and coding happening in this space. Some of the robots arrived a couple of weeks ago and we didn't quite know what to do with them, but we realised that youth were missing. So we're actually working with Basecamp for this space, helping us to determine what programs are going to happen into that space, and Unison has done some in-kind funding here for some of these programs. We've got a iMac computer space suite in here. We've got 10 high definition iMacs. So graphic design, coding, animation can occur in here. So and the programs can range from children all through to adults of people of all ages. We've got Tompkins Wake come on board here over 5 years of providing over 5 years of funding for the programs in here. The play space out in Jean Baden Square. So a few months ago, I showed you what the play space was going to look like. So sculptural during the day if it's not in use, but also a play feature at the same time. There's lots of features in here for those with disabilities as well. So for the visually impaired, you know, for those other children that will be there within the space as well. Fully funded by NZCT, and here we're talking about $263,000 worth of funding. So there's what we're looking at in terms of sponsors at the moment, and some of the dollar figures that are on there that have come through, and the total of what we've managed to secure in the last couple of months. So we've still got some outstanding funding applications at the moment, so I'm optimistic that that's going to reach 1.3 by the time we open. And it's just this is just a quote that we got from Chloe. And so, yeah, while we've been going out and getting the funding, it's hands down the reason why we've been bold and we've been brave with this project that the funders have come on board. They haven't. They've said, you know, we're not interested in funding just a you know, a day-to-day project. We want to fund something that is completely unique to this country and something quite different. So we've actually got a little video clip of Chloe that we went and videoed her a couple of days ago as part of our promotion. So I thought I'd show you.
What attracted me to investing in Te Aka Māori was the combination of literacy and health. the fact that the DHB and the council were involved was a major plus. I have always believed that reading excites the imagination, and it's the imagination that inspires children, people, to actually do creative things.
Jane, just going to take us through the next steps.
So we're continuing to work trying to get additional sponsors for this, because there are some other things that we still want to do. We're beginning an awareness and marketing campaign, and that looks like starting around Labour weekend. We're in the process of obviously getting the building finished and then moving in with all the interior stuff, which takes a bit of doing. Jean Batten Square should be complete by our opening day. We have a formal opening day on the 24th of November, so that will be a dawn blessing followed by an official opening, and then on the 25th we're planning all kinds of activities for a special opening day for the families, so give away prizes and things like that, balloons and other creative stuff. I'm not giving away too much, but and then of course we'll be opening on Sundays, so that the 25th is a Saturday, Sunday the 26th will be our first Sunday, so that will be a real plus for Rotorua. We've been trying to do this for a while and we're very pleased to be able to do that. So yeah, from here it's just all go still.
Look, Jane, I want to call you Auntie Jane, really. You're leaving...
I'm Nana now.
Yeah, Nana Jane. You're going to leave a legacy project. When this is finished and transitioned and moved through and settled down, and thank you for that, because you've been through so many changes with your staff. Astonishing, but this is one of the most innovative projects in New Zealand, and when we go out to external funders, they ask, what's the point of difference? Why shouldn't the DHB be funding the Children's Hub? Why shouldn't Council be fully funding the library? And actually, all these point of difference that you've brought to us today show that with innovation and through our partnership approach, we're attracting some very big thinkers in behind this, which is a legacy for our children. But I just wondered, watching your presentation, Portia, about the funders coming on board, there's also the Brainwave Trust. And I wonder if we've gone in there, because this would capture their imagination about getting our children wired right for learning as a basic building block in their early years. So that's one funder that's not up there yet. They tend to look at the other end of the spectrum with dementia and neurological conditions, but everyone would rather invest in the front end. So that's one, but congratulations. It's really quite emotional watching that, to see that it's coming together, and you've kept that innovation and that free-spirited thinking with our children at the centre, and I thank you for that. It's going to be so exciting. You know, people moan about no car parks and all that, all those sort of challenges in the funding, but when they do see this, I think it'll all melt away and they'll go, golly, our community's got one of the greatest gifts for our children, which is a free access learning centre about education. It's terribly exciting to see, so thank you all.
Lovely question. Merepika, Rotorua Tate.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say that thank God for visionary funders and sponsors, because I can tell you not all of our funders, trusts, etc., are visionary. You can put something like this to them and they won't get it, and they don't get it. I spent yesterday morning with Chloe, and she gets it. She does get it. And, you know, and when I said that I was on the council, and she spoke highly of this, because this is about trying to ensure that our children actually grow their growing inquiring minds. And so she got it, but I can tell you, from what I've heard, and not all funders get this. And you know, I heard the anxiety expressed by some members of our community, the thought of merging health and wellness, children's health and wellness with the library. That was just a definite no. Yeah, it was beyond them. And so there is, I suppose you could say, an awareness raising of the community that has to be done. I think we've started on this. But yes, thank God. I'm just saying thank God for sponsors who are visionary and who see what can be achieved, and that our children are important, children matter, and that we should be doing everything we can to grow their inquiring minds, because they will be our citizens of the future here in Rotorua. So, yeah, roll on whenever it's going to be opened, on 25th, I think, isn't it? So thank you for the work done. Can I just say, Mr. Chairman, I do hope, and I mean no disrespect to current staff, but I hope we will have young staff there, because that's important as well, so that the children see reflected youngerish people, you know, taking an interest in them when they're going into their space as well. Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions, Jane. Firstly, on the 24th, sincerely hope that those of us who've backed you all the way, not only on the DHB but also on council, can participate in the celebration of this opening. The other thing is, Portia, we're on budget, we're on track, we're on time. The naysayers who said, you know, where's this funding gap, where are you going to get all this money? You've got, I just can't believe it, you've got $1.3 million that you've actively gone out as a team and solicited from our community. And why I wanted to know, I didn't know who the Right Family Foundation is, and I found out yesterday, but I think it was incumbent that a Taronga person can see the vision that we have for our young people from a health aspect and from an education aspect, puts their hands in their pocket and comes on board. And I was pleased you played the thing. But the $1.3 million is there. Is that going to fill the gap, and are you on track?
So yes to all of those. We're on track, on budget, on time. Yes.
Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, I just really want to acknowledge the work which has predominantly been Portia's in putting, and JP, but Portia has done the lion's share. Putting a funding application together is hard work. It takes a lot of effort, and you can trot off to funders and you can be turned down. You can have no said to you more often than you ever have yes said to you. I think the significant difference here is that when you believe, truly believe in what you're trying to get funding for, when you can inspire those who are listening, and some like Meripeka absolutely don't get it, but again, sometimes they need to hear it a few times. They need to see who else is getting on board. And I think that this has had a snowball effect with funders, that they've recognised this is based here in our community, but every single community in the country is going to be looking at what we're doing. What we're doing is groundbreaking. And I don't think people truly understand that we've not walked into the 21st century, we've made a flying leap into it. And with Basecamp coming on, with our young digital creatives helping to drive this, the whole project has taken on the vision of something truly stellar. And I think we'll be quite amazed at how many people who had their doubts will actually come to see what a fantastic opportunity. But again, Portia, well done, because Portia's carried the stress. It's very stressful putting a funding application, and anyone around the table that's done one, and these are not little ones, these are huge, and she's carried the weight of this project on her shoulders for that, and I really want to thank you for that, because you've done a fantastic job. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt, because we've heard certainly the council side of things, but we haven't heard the passion and enthusiasm I know that Dr. Moreau and the medical practitioners have got for this centre too, and I'm sure Councillor Kawa Tate has heard on the DHB. They can't wait for this to occur, to see young mothers and young fathers engaged and taken through the whole spectrum. Councillor Maxwell, before Councillor Maxwell, I need to say also, Councillor Maxwell, your efforts, not only in this project but on many, many projects, mountain biking, Councillor Donaldson would agree, BMX tracks, velodromes, all sorts of things, your efforts to make sure that Rotorua's voice is heard and gets access to considerable funding over the years is also to be acknowledged here today, and we thank you for your efforts. Councillor Maxwell.
Yeah, before finding a question somewhere, I do just want to congratulate Portia and our staff and our people, and that something to look forward to. And I want to say that I ran into Bryce and Norma, who've been working on behalf of Ngāti Whakaua with you guys, and they're just excited. They've been enjoying working with us, seeing it come to fruition. And thank you for those comments, Mr. Chairman. The question I wanted to ask, those dates, would I be right? Don Stafford used to tell us that's the date when the birth of Township of Rotorua on those dates or something. But I don't know how many years or whatever, but that's a question. But at the same time, I want to say that what I'm also pleased is that just seeing the innovative other sponsors that have come on board. Well done, well done. Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson, finally.
Yeah, thank you for having the opportunity to have the final say. At the risk of us all sitting around here and patting ourselves on the back, it'd be most remiss if I didn't say that I sat in a meeting well before the last election where Her Worship the Mayor had got wind of the fact that the DHB were setting up a new paediatric services all wrapped into one centre, and she thumped the table and said to the Chief Executive, that's got to be in the inner city and our library needs to be the place and make it happen. And she's been fearless about that right through the election, and as people have said, it took a lot to convince a lot of people, but you know, that's where the initial vision came from, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. Go.
Moreau, and also former Councillor Thurston, Councillor Rokawa take to convince the DHB board that this was the right thing to do cannot be understated either, because there were a lot of doubting views there. But the Mayor drove it. She wouldn't take no for an answer. So to you, Your Worship, whilst you talk to Jane about leaving a legacy, I think jointly you have a legacy, and certainly the work that you've done in the funding side of it has been acknowledged here today also. So wish you ladies well, and let's get to the opening on budget, on time, as you said, Portia. So congratulations, and thank you for your report this morning. Sven? Sorry? Yeah, go on. Una?
Yep. So just referring back to the strategy group, not wanting to take the spotlight off the wonderful news of the library there, I'll take the report as read.
Yep, I think there's collaboration with the CNI in getting a whakarewa forestry management plan. I think that's to be acknowledged. So do we go down here? And we're on to the business support group now, page 47. Unless anyone has any questions about the previous. Mr. Martin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, page 46, the bottom paragraph. My question is, re the entrance into Maumaku to Nongataha, who is actually the project group? Can anyone tell me, please?
Question.
I'll have to find out for you and bring that information back
I
to
think
you.
some involvement of Progress Nongatawa and iwi should also be involved there. They were previously.
Not only Progress Nongatawa, Mr Chairman, Ngāti Tura.
I said that iwi. I said iwi.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, because
Just
they were
just which area?
yeah,
iwi
they were
then?
heavily involved in the previous structures that the Transit New Zealand put up. So
Because we did the first one up at Tinakau.
yeah,
You and
yeah,
I.
in Tarakinga.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Right, the business support group, page 47. Now, Thomas is going to give us we were going to do it in confidential, but we've got nothing to hide in terms of the Rotorua Museum. Not that we do things in confidential to hide either, but because of commercial sensitivity issues. I'm sick of getting criticised for that in the media. So, Thomas, Rotorua Museum update. Oh, he's going to do rates first. A rates presentation?
Thank you, Chair. First one will just be on the rating revaluations, and then there's a couple of property people that will come later, and I'll do the museum following that one. So I do have, everyone knows, Murray with me. So Murray's here to answer any technical questions regarding a revaluation that obviously I won't be able to answer. So the presentation itself, look, I've left the branding on it from our valuer. So our valuer has prepared this presentation for us. So as we all know, every 3 years the district is revalued for rating purposes. The last one was down in 2014, and we've done this one. Just a reminder that the new rating valuations will not come into effect until the next rating year, which will be July 2018. So obviously when people receive their new rating valuations and then receive their new rating notice, there's obviously a difference, and that will realign next year. So what was valued? The capital value and the land value. So both of those items were revalued. And so I'll just quickly jump to what has actually changed. So I think if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that there's been a significant change in the capital value of the district. So overall, the district has grown from $13 billion of capital value to $17 billion, so a 32% increase. Each of the sectors, so obviously we break down the property groups and the types, all have had an increase, but some obviously have had a more significant increase in others. And if I just go to this and show you graphically, it's a little bit easier to see. So solid increases across the board, with probably the exception of forestry, mining and the other. But obviously it is skewed, and as you can see, a significant increase in the residential capital values. And considering the buoyant real estate market that's been in place since probably 2015, it should probably come as no surprise to yourselves and to anyone else that's happened. From how has it shifted? So on the right, you can see where the capital values lay against the different sectors. So residential made up just below 50%, so 48%. And you can see how each of those sectors have changed. And what's happened is that pie has slightly redistributed, because obviously the residential sector has grown in value at a higher rate than the commercial, the dairy, the lifestyle, and the other. So for those of you that are interested in, particularly the residential, what has happened in the residential, this is, I guess, a summary of what's happened by suburb. What stands out is probably the suburbs that were probably at the lower end value previously have had the most increases. And I think if you look at Fairy Springs, Fordlands, Kotu, Ohunimutu, Selwyn Heights in particular, they are in the 60 to 70% average range increase. Whereas some of those areas that already had the higher capital values, the Kawa Points, the Linmores, as such, didn't have as much of an increase. And even when you break down, and we'll show you at the end, Murray's developed this great tool that will be available to the public. You can actually look in at suburb, and you can actually look at street level, and you can compare what your property's done versus others. You'll even see in suburbs whereby, and I'll take Springfield, you can look at a road in particular, and there's a road where obviously some properties were $100,000 higher than the average of that street. They didn't have as much of an average increase as those others. And what we've noticed is definitely the top end hasn't moved as much, but the lower end has significantly lifted. Significantly lifted to the point where I think 3 years ago we were talking about an average property value, Murray, of 270,000 for residential, 280? Yeah, 260. And we're now talking about 370. So as you can imagine, that's a $110,000 increase in the average capital value of a residential property. I will notice that in this presentation, councillors, there seems to be an anomaly. This slide shows the average property for residential at 390, and this other slide shows it as 370. So we think the previous slide is wrong. So we believe it is 370. We're just going to confirm with our values. Again, just looking at the commentary on there, look, these can quickly move out of date. It has been that the lower values property as a whole have lifted much higher than the higher values. The lifestyle properties as well, in particular like the lakes communities and so forth, because they already had a higher capital value than most residential properties, they haven't moved as much either, so they've got similar increases, I guess, to the higher value residential properties. But even them themselves have seen a 27.5% average increase to the average value. So again, while it's not the 46 that we talked about for residential, they have lifted as well. I guess to look at it to graphically as to how these have come about, so what the values have done is they've looked at all the sales data and they create rolling averages, and there's two lines there for residential. One is if you take what the average increase is done on a 6 months worth of data versus a 3 months worth of data, but you can see there that obviously from the mid 2015 through to really October, November 2016 is where the bulk of the increase in the capital values took place, and since then it plateaued out a little bit and then obviously just peaked again mid 2017. And you can see also what's happened there for lifestyle, just as a reference to show you as to the sort of data that the valuers look at, how far back they go and those sorts of things. Commercial and industrial, by all means, I've been known for going fast, so hopefully I'm not going too fast. Commercial and industrial, so those together have moved on average about 20%. I think the noticeable thing there was that the rental values that landlords are getting have increased slightly, and what that means is obviously that the values are tied to those rental values, but they probably haven't moved as much as expected, and what's happened is that people are paying more to buy that rental income stream. So what that means is that the yields are going down. So rather than getting what they may have got as a 8 or 10% return on those commercial properties, they may now be accepting a 6 to 8% return. So, and buildings with good quality fit out and good quality tenants are selling much better than vacant properties or properties that are affected by earthquake proneness. So, even within that 20% average, you'll have some properties that have moved much higher than that, obviously, and some that are below, and they'll depend on those factors. The dairy farming and pastoral was an interesting one as well. So, so those have grown as well by about 23%. But within that, there is an impact coming, and so the values have noticed, and you can see there that it is becoming more complex as a result of the regional council rules and the regulations that are being imposed. And in particular, Plan Change 10 is having a significant result or impact on the way that values are being properties are being valued. And in a way, I guess what they look at is that your current use, therefore, is your highest use. So property in the past that may have been used for dry stock but had the potential to be used for dairy farming would have been valued based on that potential use. And now that land is now being valued based on what it currently is, because there is no ability to change that higher use. And so there's been a significant amount of movement in those as well. And we saw a little bit of it probably a few years ago with the last reval, but we've definitely seen a bigger impact of it this time. And as the valuers have noted, they actually expect that gap to widen now over time with the implementation of these rules. So no inability if those rules go ahead with regards to converting to a different use. So therefore those properties will hold now a lower value than what they potentially could have. And they've also noted that farmers, as a result, they're prepared to pay for really good farms. So probably farms that are outside of the caldera and not impacted by PC10 are obviously selling much higher than those that are in the caldera. But also those farms that don't probably have the regulatory challenges then that some of those others face as a result of some of those changes are selling much easier and at higher values than some of the others. And the other thing they noted as well is that they saw no real impact of the dairy farm payout with regards to sales. So when the price was down at $3.90 versus $6.75, you didn't see any significant fluctuation or difference in the sale price of dairy farms, which I guess is, you could say, would be unusual, but probably not. Finally, two more I think. Last one was one of the other things that we had to do was on the Valuer General required us to amalgamate rating units. So this was predominantly rural properties, or what it was rural properties. So where you had a farmer who was farming, whose farming block might have been 3 or 4 different farming titles. So it might have, and for a range of reasons, they may have been in different ownership. From a rating perspective, we had to amalgamate them and rate them as one. That doesn't mean that all the separate legal titles were amalgamated. So from a legal perspective, they all still retain their separate title, but from a rating perspective, we had to rate them as one. And so there were 598 of those affected, and they were amalgamated down to 180. Now, the pro was, I think as a whole, the rating value when you combine 2 or 3 properties together reduces. So some of those would see a reduction in the rates impact going forward. And we had a number of people that didn't want to do that, and for particular reasons, they may have been in the process of selling their properties or those sorts of things. And so we did argue on their behalf to the Valuer General that didn't make sense to amalgamate, but I think the Valuer General said, no, you're amalgamating anyway. So we had little choice in that matter. So the process going forward, if you don't like your valuation, so you do have 30 days to lodge an objection. So all the letters have now gone to the printer, and they'll be started to be posted out in the next few days. And so there is a significant amount of information available on our website with regards to if someone is not happy with their rating valuation, whether they believe it's too high or whether it's too low. There is a process that they can go through on that. And just while Murray shows the next thing, so to make it simpler for people to understand what's happened to their property, maybe in relative to their suburb, or how their suburb has moved relative to Rotorua, we have loaded all the capital value changes up into our GIS system, and we have created the ability to have a map whereby you can take a top view of the district and it shows it kind of in colours with regards to the average percentage of change, and as you zoom in, you'll be able to see what's happened to your suburb, what's happened to your street, what's happened to your individual properties. We've also captured some sales data on there as well within the last, I think, 3 or 6 months, Murray, so you can therefore see if a property is sold in that period, how that sale price compares to that new rateable value as well. Just bearing in mind, obviously, that the rateable values doesn't include the value of improvements that you may have in the property, so there's always going to be a difference between what people think their property is worth versus what the rateable value actually is. And I'll let Murray drive this one.
So we can sort out the technical issues here. All good. Okay, so as Thomas says, what we plan to do is put this up on the website, hopefully go live with it tomorrow. People will be receiving their rates notices or valuation notices in the mail on probably Saturday. It's the intention, and if this is up at the same time, that'll be great. So we're going to put some links on the website that people can go in and get this extra information on how their value
compares to their neighbours' values, and also some recent sales data to hopefully give them some comfort around their valuation and how it was arrived at. So I've made a pretty simplistic tool here in terms of navigation. When they go to this link, they'll see some helpful guideline notes down the left-hand side there, just in terms of navigation, and tell them what they can expect to see from the map. And one of the first things you'll see is the pretty colours. To give you an idea of what that means, if you click on this tab here, it gives you what those colours range equate to. So from the lighter colours, you're talking about a 0 to 15%, say, increase in your capital value. Up to the darker colours, you've got some pretty dramatic increases there. What the people will be able to do, the public will be able to do, is drill down to their individual property, and anybody else's property really that takes their fancy. But however, I must have clicked on one, so bad example, okay. So just click on this one here. So if you select your individual property first, we've got a good idea. You can check you've got the right location address for a kick-off, new capital value, your previous capital value, and then the percentage change that's gone up or down as it may be, but mostly up, and some extra small information there about land value. So then that allows you then click on all your neighbouring properties and see how theirs moves. So hopefully you can see that yours is moved by the same as theirs, or if not, you know the reasons for that. These little dots that are appearing over here, if you click on one of those, that actually gives you a recent sale that has occurred within the last 6 months. We only go on to the last 6 months because anything older than that is really a bit obsolete and redundant in terms of the shift that's occurred in the market. So again, if you can check not only your neighbouring properties, but if a sale's occurred, that you can see, well, how does that sale relate to the value that's been put on your property, and hopefully give you some comfort. So, because commonly, we last reval we received approximately 1,000 objections. Our valuers have to physically go out and visit each one of those properties and process a review, and it's quite a significant cost. So hopefully by giving, and some of those objections we get, people don't provide a lot of evidence or support in terms of their content of values. So hopefully this tool will give them the ability to go in and check that we've done our job properly, or our valuers have, and give them some comfort before they lodge an objection to us. That's probably about it. So, any questions?
Been through this a couple of times now, Murray. This is the 10th time I've been through it. So, my increase is 44%. So straight away, you're getting on Facebook and on the internet, holy Moses, my rate's going up 43%? You've got to be joking. Then you go in and explain. So, will you have on the website the average increases in each of those blocks? Because that determines whether you get a rate increase or a decrease. Because if you're above the average increase in that residential block, you'll get a rate increase. But if you're below, when we never hear from these people, you get a rate decrease. So I hope that is part of the communication and the understanding of things, because a lot of people think because they've got a huge value increase, they're going to get huge rate increases, which is quite incorrect. So are we going to communicate that through?
Look, that's definitely being communicated. I think it's important to realise that any change in the rates that will happen as a result of applying the valuations is, as you say, looking at what your property value has done comparable to others. Because obviously, while the average increase for residential was 43% in value, we're not all of a sudden going to start collecting 43% more rates revenue. The amount that we collect is still the same. It's just redistributed differently, and it redistributes based on what all those other factors are doing. And so we don't have those numbers yet, and we don't know what the impact is, but obviously it will be nowhere close to 43, or, as you say, your average. Yep.
other unfortunate thing is that people think that that is their market value.
Correct, and it's not. And so, if I take my house for example, my one's probably about $30,000 or $40,000 less than what I could probably still sell it for, because it doesn't take into account
Everyone says that.
the internal fit out and the chattels and so forth. So if you've got a property that they decide to have marble bathrooms and all those sorts of things, the capital values may not take that into account.
Already these are out of date, because
Yes,
I
correct.
can quote you a street where the property has had a valuation increase of 322. Its valuation is now 320 as RV. I sold it for 410, and the next door neighbouring property sold for 380. So already they're out of date. All it is and people need to understand this, is a mechanism for council to set rates. And that's it. Don't read any more into it than what is there. However, when you start comparing lakes with residential, lifestyle, you can see where all the values are loaded. So we've always had this contention about the differentials and smoothing off. See, like last time, in the last valuation, we smoothed off the farming sector and we put $280,000, I think, as a smoothing mechanism. I mean, I want to see the impact on the individual ratepayer, like we did when we smoothed out the rural, because if there has been a huge swing to residential, we're going to be impacting on people's ability or affordability or ability to pay. And you've already highlighted that most of the huge increases are in the lower socioeconomic areas, the Kotus, the Western Heights, etc. So I think we need to have a look at a complete picture. I don't think this is the complete picture of the impact of this valuation.
Look, Chair, you're right. Look, we are aware of what may happen, and we are working towards understanding what that is, and that will form part of our discussion in the long-term plan workshops with regards to once we understand what the impact is and what are the mitigation steps, if any, that we could potentially apply. So that'll probably be a couple of months away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in the amalgamation of the rural rating units, because if 598 rating units have come down to 180, if you do a quick calculation, that's going to do, if I've done my mental arithmetic correctly, it's going to change the number of rateable properties that we've got in the district by more than our growth rate. So it's going to totally skew all our figures, isn't it?
Skew them how, Councillor?
Well, for example, when we actually put up on there what our average rate per ratepayer is and so on, and what our growth factors are in terms of number of rating properties, all those figures are going to change, because we've got a reduction in rating properties by about 1.6%.
I guess yes, the base does reduce from, if you were to calculate those percentages, that would be the only impact here.
Where I'm coming from is, if they're farming contiguously, they become part of the whole lot. So instead of 4 at 200 acres, it's 1 at 800. Correct? But the farming box stays the same size. Yeah, so the 800 will still attract the very similar level of rates.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, cool. Right. Poto?
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Love the tool. I can't wait for that to go live. And the assurances for a mechanism for council to set rates, love that. And evidence of value, I appreciate that too. Lots of the complaints I'm receiving is a potential visualisation of gentrification. Because as the prices of the homes go up, the rents go up, poor hara whānau can't afford. So those that own houses that are just kind of barely making it through are now getting rated out. And we're starting to see a second wave of Māori families leaving because our city is too successful. So I want to make sure that with all the growth, we are still looking after the families who have been here for a long time. And could I get a report, or could I get this report today, if that's at all possible, the re-evaluation report. That's just something good for me to go back to Te Tātou.
You mean the PowerPoint? They're in Stella.
Climate change issue that we ignore, but it hits us all the time. I feel I've been around the world long enough to see that gentrification and all of our, it's optimistic, it's all about money and growth, disadvantages poor communities. And it's good to see that Koutu, Selwyn Heights, Ford Block are going up, but I also see at the ground level, it means some of those families can't live in those poor communities. And the higher up they go, the more those families have to move out. So at some stage we have to balance between high performance and lots of money and protecting the families who live here. Kia ora.
Yeah, and I think your point is well made, and those are the discussions we'll have at the LTP situation. Mr. Stenton.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, Thomas Murray. Obviously, this is going to be a significant part of a debate going forward in the LTP as to how the new valuations are going to affect the rating across the district. But in the past, we've had criticisms about the methodology on the valuations of the district in terms of desktop valuations. Just in your example that you put up there, you showed a few dots about sales, and you went to a particular street where one had gone up quite significantly, the others were all within a certain parameter below it. I've done a few cursory checks on the Reddit last night and found that, for example, out in the lakes, some properties out in the lakes compared to some properties away from lakeside are in fact gone up by the same margin, which indicates to me that that's a desktop valuation. Can you just confirm how much of a desktop valuation this is and how much actual valuing work has been done, please?
I think, as Murray's about to say, it's a mass appraisal system. I think it's unrealistic to think that we will send a valuer out to every property in the district, all 28,000 of them. So I think you just have to accept the fact that it's a mass appraisal, and its purpose is for rating only and nothing more. And yes, other people do use it for other things, but we try and do it as cost effective as possible.
It's making, Thomas, there's a big difference between a lakeside property and one that isn't lakeside. And what he's saying is the wand has been spread evenly to the both of them. I mean, you're talking 1.2 million for lakeside, you're talking 400,000 for non-lakeside. So the question that Jim's asking is the desktop been a rule of thumb, or what percentage have they actually physically gone and valued in person?
Oh, so I guess they obviously take into account where those properties lie, and I think if you looked at my presentation, it actually touched on those sorts of things. So and it actually noticed that obviously properties that have views or that have lakes, access to the lake, and those sorts of things are valued according to those amenities and those aspects as well. Are not obviously discounted.
See, Thomas, we shall see.
Oh, and look, and the reality is they can't get all of them right, which is why there is that objection process, and people will have the ability to do that. So,
Councillor Tapsell, then Her Worship.
Thank you. I do have another question, but I want to go back to what Jim said, because I think that that's very important, especially for the lakes. I mean, they've got a view, yeah, whatever, but they've been there for a long time. And what we forget is, although, you know, there's a percentage, I don't know, 65% who are out of towners, and that's their holiday home. But the ones that are there actually fall into that low socioeconomic group, the same, just as Western Heights Fordlands, earning a very, very small income. So I think that is definitely something that needs to be put into place, and I do hope that the objection process is fair and is put in a lot of consideration into aspects like that. Now, the question I do want to raise, because looking at this is actually kind of quite heartbreaking for me, to be honest, as someone who is a young person trying to save up for a house. You know, this is just putting me out another 5-10 years before I even get my own home. And I'm 25 now, and I don't even know how I'm going to afford a house by the time I'm 30, let alone having kids in tow and everything else. So that raises a very serious question that we have here in Rotorua about housing affordability for our families and our young families and young people especially. And what are we doing to help that? I mean, you see significant, I think it was 48% on your slide, a significant increase in the values of properties. And so the question is, why is this? And is this an issue with supply? I mean, clearly, we already know because of the house prices. Is the house prices going up because we have too much demand to cater for the supply of homes that we have? So while I'm absolutely delighted that our Mayor Steve Chadwick has managed to sign off the new housing accord to bring 900 new homes in within the next few years, is that enough, and can we be doing more? Because that big question on housing affordability, you know, it's a serious issue for all people of all ages, let alone someone young like myself who's still trying to get into my own house.
I agree. And I guess the recent national election was exactly that, but probably Henry is by far better to answer that with regards to the work that his team is doing.
So, Councillor, look, I'm happy to touch on the sort of overall strategy around housing at the start of my discussion. It's a pretty complex area, I think, as you've hit, but yeah, I'm happy to talk about that.
Oh, beg your pardon, Worship.
That's right. Good question, Tanya. I think all our hearts are with your generation. Imagine if you lived in Auckland, where the average first home is about 1.4 million now. So, you know, that will encourage more people here, but that'll push a demand as well, and it has. But my question to you is, how many appeals do we get on average in the past when this has happened? Because that's a very important mechanism for finessing to make sure that people can challenge the rateable value. I think that's better than actually the methodology, which is mass, is encouraging people to look at an appeal so that they feel that this is fair and reasonable. So I don't know how many appeals we got in the past.
Yeah, approximately 1,000 on the last reevaluation, and I think a similar amount in the one before that, actually. So it seems to be the trend. Most significant thing that will affect that is usually people not so motivated to object when the valuation goes up, but when it goes down, they take a little bit of umbrage at the devaluing of one of their key assets, if not their main one. So yeah, that's mainly about be sitting around that 1,000.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I did hear and appreciate the comments made by Councillor Tapsell. However, I do think we should not lose sight of the fact that for many years, house prices in New Zealand were certainly much lower than anywhere else in the country. In fact, people have said they, yes, what did I say? I don't know, but no, in Rotorua, yes. And so, you know, they were much lower than other places around the country, and so I think we have to bear that in mind. Now they're starting to get to the place where they are comparable with other cities or cities in New Zealand. Also, I think that people in those places, such as Fordlands and Western Heights and Kotu, now the families who live there have got good collateral and equity in their houses. So I think we mustn't, so while I clearly understand what you're saying, Councillor Tapsell, there is the other argument, and I'm so pleased for those people in those areas so that now they've seen a good increase in their homes, and I think that shouldn't be overlooked or underestimated either. Thank you.
Councillor Okawa Tate is absolutely right. The very nature of Western Heights, Kotu and Fordlands is changing, because those rentals have been bought by first home buyers who take pride in their homes, who develop their homes, who extend them and upgrade them. So the very nature of some of these suburbs is changing to the positive. Jim Stanton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to comment on Her Worship's suggestion around the valuation and people protesting at the valuations. We've had a criticism of that in the past as well, that I guess it's not so much between your valuation and the one next door, it's the whole area And with this methodology that is used, it can contort those valuations, and people have put in objections to the valuations in the past, and generally speaking you'll find that they only move a very small amount either way, and probably don't meet the expectations that those people have requested the valuations be looked at for. And obviously you also have the other situation where some people don't mind their value actually going up quite considerably, and others do, depending on their circumstances and what they're looking to achieve from it. But the whole exercise really is around fairness and equity between the valuations in a particular location versus another location, and what those differences are. The reason I brought up the matter between, for example, lakeside and non-lakeside, and looking at the same average increase. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Kenton, we'll break for lunch.
Thank you. I'm just interested to know if you've got any statistics as to how these increases compare with similar increases in other surrounding districts.
Can't, because we're all done at a different time.
Yeah, it all depends on when they revalue as well, councillor, so we can find out as to which other councils are revaluing and do a bit of a comparison, but I'd say it would be extremely similar.
Go online on QV. QV do them on a regular basis, but a whole of portfolio revaluation is only done once every 3 years. I think Taronga's was done last year. So, but as soon as they come out, they're out of date. Potawa finally?
Do other councils have similar tools, or was this the first?
Not too sure what the other councillors have done. That's no, it's a fairly rare tool out there. There's a couple of councils I'm aware of that got something similar. Not this. We hope to be able to use this for other engagement tools as well going down the line. And potentially we can use this with coming out for our rates review. We can replace those little pop-up boxes with, instead of capital value change, with proposed rates changes and things like that. So that'll be a very easy, user-friendly tool for ratepayers to lock into.
We're all adjourned for lunch, and we'll be back at 12:40. Okay. Is it okay? So what are we up? What are we up? So what are we up to?
When we come back, we're still on Thomas, and we'll be doing the museum.
Okay. Okay, then we'll do that then. Oh, it's only minutes that we've got with the... Oh.